Hello and welcome to this edition of Biz Talk on CGTN. I'm Lulu in Beijing. China has the world's largest and fastest growing aging population, that is according to the WHO. It expects that by year 2040, the number of people aged above 60 years old in China will account for about 28% of the nation's total population, and that is a result of longer life expectancy and lower fertility rate. So this huge shift in demographic landscape represents huge challenges and opportunities in the country's health and socio-economic development. To delve into China's current demographic structure and the future of the work, we are now joined by Professor Zhu Yu from Asia Demographic Research Institute of Shanghai University. Good morning, Professor Zhu. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to join the talk.
Now, Professor, so the United Nations recently announced that India will surpass China and become the world's most populous country very soon. Does that mean, what implication does that bring to the world? Do you think that this is causing more concerns or benefits?
Yeah, indeed. You just said that India will be overtaking China and becoming the #1 country in population. And I think this will definitely be big news in the world. I think one of the most important implications of this significant demographic event is that India may become another world factory if it could take advantage of this change and harvest the so-called demographic dividend, which is created by its enormous population and the relatively young age structure of the population. However, whether this will become a reality or to what extent India can harvest its demographic dividend remains to be seen. China has been called a world factory for decades and has been a model country in harvesting the demographic dividend since it adopted the reform and open door policies, with its labor-intensive industries constituting the backbone of its tremendous economic growth for a long period of time. However, China's enormous population size is not the only condition leading to such a success. Suitable social economic policies accommodating the international environment to facilitate the transfer of labor-intensive industries from more developed countries, well-established infrastructure, a relatively equitable society, and very importantly, a labor force with reasonably good educational and skill levels are all important conditions for China's success to become a world factory. So whether India could become another world factory would also depend on whether suitable social economic policies are adopted and some basic conditions are created. As to whether India becoming #1 of the world in population is a good thing or a worry, I think India's development in labor-intensive industries may give rise to some competition with some similar industries in China, and this may cause some concern. But on the other hand, China and India are at different stages of development, and some labor-intensive industries are in the process of gradually phasing out in China. And so in this sense, the competition between China and India may not as serious as imagined. And the development in the two countries may even complement each other and be beneficial to the world. Thank you.
Professor Zhu, some are saying that maybe we in China should be a bit worried about no longer being the world's most populous nation. I mean, how can we comprehend this?
Well, people tend to be proud of being #1. But for China to become #2 in the population size does not make me disappointed. In fact, this can be regarded as a success, as it is a result of China successfully completing a demographic transition that is a transformation from the stage with high mortality and high fertility to the stage with low mortality and high fertility, accompanied by faster population growth, and then finally to the stage of low fertility and low mortality with low and even negative population growth. However, we do have some concerns because in terms of the demographic transition, we are an overachiever with our total fertility rate of, or TFR, which is the average number of children a woman would have in her childbearing years, far below the replacement level. That is the level of fertility that would make it possible for the new generation to replace the previous generation in the size of the population. So according to the 2020 census, our TFR was only 1.3, well below the replacement level of 2.1. This not only leads to the result of a shrinking size of the population, but more importantly, the rising dependency ratio with the working age population needing to support more and more dependents, especially the aged people, on a per capita basis. So how to bring our TFR back to the replacement level is something important that we need to make effort to achieve. But our goal is not necessarily to become #1 again of the world in terms of the population.
You made a great point there,
Thanks.
Professor Zhu. You talked about how being #1 may not be that important, but TFR is definitely a number that we should be tracking. You talked about it is important to bring that number back to a certain level that can support economic growth. We're going to delve deeper into that later on in the show to ask you about what are the possible measures that we can take. But now let me go into get to another question. Many people are talking about how China is enjoying this has been enjoying this huge demographic dividend. So with the size of the population shrinking, should we be worried that we're losing that dividend?
Yeah, as I just mentioned, shrinking population is a serious demographic issue in China that we need to attach a greater importance to. However, this does not necessarily mean that we are losing the demographic dividend. In fact, when we talk about demographic dividend, we can divide it into two types. One is mainly based on the largest size of the population, and the other is based on the high quality of the population. As I mentioned earlier, China has been a model country in harvesting demographic dividend in the last decades. However, so far, what we have harvested has been largely the demographic dividend based on China's enormous size of the population. Now we are entering the stage to harvest the demographic dividend based on the population quality, and we are actually in a good position to do this. As I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons for China to become a model country in harvesting the demographic dividend is because we have a labor force with a reasonably good educational and skill levels. In the last decades, since the reform and the opening up, the educational level of both China's labor force as well as its general population has improved significantly. As the 2020 census results suggest, the average years of education for the population aged 15 years and above was 9.91. The average number of people with college education per 100,000 people were about 15,000, almost double that in the 2010 census. And the total size of the population with the college education in China as a whole already reached more than 280 million. Furthermore, in 2022, the average education for the new entrants to the workforce already reached the level of 14 years, which is close to the level of college education. At the same time, the health condition of China's population has also steadily improved, with the life expectancy reaching nearly 78 years in 2020, surpassing that of the US. So the role of such conditions of population quality in China, especially its educational level, can play a significant role in promoting economic growth. Actually, a recent study by a colleague of mine at Asian Demographic Research Institute, Dr. Guillaume Marat, suggested that given China's rapid increase in human capital, low fertility may not pose a significant obstacle to continued economic growth in the coming decades, as its effect will more than offset by rising productivity of well-educated labor force. So despite the negative population growth, we can still be reasonably optimistic about China's economic development in the future, although the current low fertility issue should still be taken seriously. Now, what we can do in the future is to make more efforts to increase educational and skill levels of our labor force, as there is still a gap between us and many developed countries to close, and then to make full use of the increasingly high quality of the labor force to restructure our economy so that we can promote the development of higher value added industries and gradually get rid of the reliance on the labor-intensive industry, which used to be the case in the last decades. So I believe in that way, China can still harvest the demographic dividend for a long period of time, but this will be human capital based rather than population size based. Thank you.
Yeah, so Professor, you're talking about how quality should be more important than quantity in terms of the population and how we can harness on this population base. So some are saying, since you talked about low fertility rate, some are saying that low fertility rate is a symbol that country enters its modernization era. Do you think that is something that is unavoidable when a country progresses in its modernization path? If not, what is it that we can do to avoid this?
Okay, as I just mentioned, China's low fertility is actually a result of the demographic transition, which is a part of the modernization process. So in this sense, low fertility is indeed an indication that China has entered its modernization era. And to the extent that it falls to the level of around or just slightly below the replacement level, this process is inevitable. In fact, if you look around the world, about half of the countries in the world now have a below replacement level fertility. And the countries such as Japan and Germany already experienced negative population growth. However, as just mentioned, China is an overachiever of the demographic transition, resulting in a very low fertility level, as low as 1.3. Mm-hmm. So this kind of actual low fertility is something that we should have tried to avoid. But since it has already taken place, what we can do now is to do our best to create the conditions to prevent the fertility from further falling down and to make further efforts to increase it to the replacement level.
Professor Zhu, you talked about we should be doing things, to address this issue. So it seems like the Chinese government have already taken into consideration this problem. There have been policies in places to encourage birth rate. For instance, we had the second child policy, now the third child policy, including subsidies, monetary policies to, encourage young people, encourage families to give birth to more kids. To what extent do you think these policies can actually help to raise birth rate?
Yeah, it's good to see that the government is making efforts to tackle the issues of low fertility. However, it seems that so far the impacts of such policies have been limited. What happened was that when the policies of 2 children or 3 children were just released, they seem to have some immediate impacts on promoting the increase of the fertility level. But the problem is that such impacts did not last for much longer. And only after a year or so, the fertility returned to the lower level. This actually suggests that the policies to promote the fertility should be more comprehensive and should be targeting the key obstacles that prevent young people from having more children. Subsidies and monetary policies are helpful, but I think their effects are still limited because they cannot solve some more serious problems such as high housing price, lack of child care services, the conflict between career development and childbearing, just say a few for examples. So I think the government need to do some comprehensive and in-depth studies to learn more about why young people do not want to have more children and even do not want to be married, and make policies on such a basis. Actually, some actions have already been taken in this regard in some local government, and some more comprehensive policies have already been made to provide more support to child-bearing couples, such as long parental leaves, more child care supports, and more generous financial subsidies. However, we are still in the initial stage of such a comprehensive policy making to promote the increase of fertility, and the real effects of these policies remain to be seen.
Professor Yu, I agree with you. I mean, if we have policies in places, they need to be addressing the true concerns of the young couples or people who are at the age with a proper fertility age. So there are concerns about, for instance, you talked about housing prices, education, health care. These are top concerns. So what kind of efforts do you think the government needs to put in infrastructure to help to address those concerns? For instance, many parents are complaining about there are not enough schools or probably not enough good schools for their children to go to. What is it that we can do in infrastructure sector to address those?
Okay, actually, I have thought about these issues, and I think among those policies, and I compared the policies that have been taken, by government in different places, and I think among those policies to promote the increase of fertility, 3 points are particularly important. In fact, I have just mentioned briefly 2 of them, and I'm happy to take this opportunity to elaborate on them. The first is to promote the development of child care facilities and the training of child care practitioners, especially for the care of children who are younger than 3 years old and cannot be admitted to the kindergarten. This is because for most young couples, both the husband and the wife need to work full-time to afford their lives. Looking after newborn babies who are still too young to go to kindergarten is a big obstacle for them to have more than 1 child or even to have just one child. The second point is related to the housing costs. Housing is so expensive now in cities that it is a major factor to consider in young people's marriage and childbearing decision making, especially in their decision making concerning second and third child. In many cases, having a parliament in the city to accommodate a family with the 2 children is already a big concern for young couples. So how to reduce young couples' housing pressure is an important issue to consider in promoting the increase of China's fertility. And the third point is that it is now very important to restore the traditional Chinese culture of cherishing the family and the family life. Decades-long family planning campaigns seem to have significantly weakened such cultural values, and heavy workload, crowded living space, and enormous financial pressure further makes it difficult for young people to enjoy the atmosphere of family life and affection between family members. So all this make it not a desirable thing to have more children. So I think great efforts need to be devoted to nurture and promote the cultural cherishing family and family life, so that ideational change will take place to encourage young generation to have more children and to enjoy family life.
That's an interesting point there that you made, that being able to impact on people's mindset of incorporating more values about, family values, so that young people would have more desire to bear more children. That is interesting. So we have been talking about for a while about the measures and policies that to encourage birth rate. On the other end, the country needs to take good care of its aging population. I said in the opening of this show that by year 2040, close to 1/3 of China's population will be aged above 60 years old. So do you think that this is bringing new challenges, of course, for some industries, creating new job opportunities? What are those new challenges exactly?
Okay. Just like low fertility, aging is also inevitable that every country will encounter in the process of modernization. Indeed, aging has brought some serious challenges to us, especially because we are facing a rapid aging process in a very short period of time. And we already began to deal with it when our per capita GDP was only 1,000 US dollars, only 1/5 of the world average at the beginning of the new century. So you can see, actually, we are dealing with the aging issue at a relatively low level of income, right? Yeah. However, not all the consequences of aging are negative. In fact, the aging of the labor force means that those who are working in their positions are more knowledgeable and experienced now. And this is a great asset for the enterprises and institutions. With the extension of the retirement age, which is now planned and will be implemented soon, right? These aged people have more opportunities to contribute these knowledges and experiences to the society. Now, in addition to that, as already implied in your question, aging actually can also bring opportunities for the development of new service industries. Now, pension market is an example. So now the aged people need the insurance for the aged life, right? Yeah. But I would say that aged care industry are also in great demand, and they are still underdeveloped in China. many people now face the dilemma of looking after the aged parents or grandparents while having to work full-time in their respective positions. So I think the development of aged care industry, as well as other aging-related industries, will not only promote the development of the economy, but benefit an enormous number of families. I think the government at the various levels should make policies and take measures to encourage and facilitate the development of such industries so that they can achieve fast and healthy development.
That is interesting. A great point you're making, Professor Zhu, that China is actually seeing a huge shift in the lifestyle of the retired population. I mean, the older generations, they think that their retirement life is closely bounded to their children's families, but now things are already different. So by the time, let's say by 2040, when close to 1/3 of the country's population is aged between above 60 years old, they would have a different lifestyle that is offering great opportunities for the senior care industry. My question to you, Professor, is in this senior care industry, how do you think we can better leverage technologies like AI?
Yes, you mentioned AI. As a demographer, I do not know much about the AI. So I'm afraid that I cannot say much about it. But I do know that the further development of AI technology is a major new trend in the world that will affect almost every aspect of our life in our society, including the two demographic issues we have discussed about it today. In terms of low fertility in China, AI actually provides a solution to it. I think in the future, we will see more and more robots sitting or may standing besides the production lines to do the job that would otherwise be completed by human beings. Mm-hmm. They can effectively replace the production workers whose size will become increasingly smaller as a result of the declining fertility. In terms of aging, I read some materials and it says that the AI technology have already been used for the purpose of monitoring the health status of the aged people and collecting and analyzing relevant data in the nursing home. So you can see with the AI technology, the aged people in the nursing home can be better looked after. And they also can tirelessly help with work of nursing staff so that the efficiency and the quality of the work of nursing homes can be greatly improved. As a member of the aging population, I would be quite happy to receive help from robots in the future when this is needed and possible. Thank you.
That is a great vision, Professor Zhu. I'm also imagining that would make everyone's life easier. My final question to you is, Professor Zhu, what would be your piece of advice for investors, even global investors who are watching our show right now, who are looking at China opportunities in the Chinese market on the backdrop of its shifting demographic landscape? What suggestions would you give to them? Just very briefly.
Well, I think my advice to the global investor is that I be confident about China's future of the economy. Don't worry too much about China's low fertility, and be confident in technology. And I think China in the good position to make use of all the advanced technology, and also China are making great efforts to increase its fertility. And I don't think China, we should have a confidence that the China's low fertility will somehow back to a reasonable level.
All right, great stuff. That's great piece of advice. Thank you so much, Professor Zhu. Thank you very much for getting up extra early to go through this live stream with us. Thank you so much. And that was our guest of the day. That was Professor Zhu Yu from the Asian Demographic Research Institute at Shanghai University. And I hope that after this live stream, our viewers would have gained deeper understanding of the demographic change, the demographic dividend in China, and also on how we can harness and benefit from China's sustainable development. Well, that's it for this edition of Biz Talk. Till next time, bye for now.